welcome everybody out to tonight's meeting, the North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting for May 1st, 2024. I'm Chairman Thomas. I'll be conducting tonight. We will begin our meeting with an invocation or a thought from Commissioner Watson, followed which being led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Green. Let's go to that point.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this opportunity to gather together as Planning Commission for North Ogden. We're grateful to live here in this beautiful city. We pray that we will be led and guided as we make these decisions that pertain to the wellness of North Ogden. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, back here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll make note that Commissioner Webb is excused tonight. Consideration and action on the April 3rd, 2024 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Any corrections or adjustments that need to be made?
No.
Make a motion that we approve the April 3rd, 2024 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Do we have any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest on tonight's agenda? All right. If not, we'll open up for public comments for anybody who'd like to speak on something that is not on the agenda. We invite you to do so at this time. If you're online with us, please raise your hand and we'll let you comment. All right, being there's no comments, we'll move on to our only agenda item tonight, which is a site plan review 2024-03, consideration and action regarding an administrative application for site plan approval for the construction and upgrade of storage units at Lock It Up Storage, located at approximately 300 East, 2000 North. Our presenter is Scott Hess, our Community and Economic Development Director. Scott.
Thank you, Chair Thomas and the Planning Commission. So we have with us our applicants as well as the project manager applicant representative here tonight. Would encourage the Planning Commission, if they have any questions, to ask those to them, and I'll run through the staff report quickly. If you remember, when I started in 2021, storage units were no longer a permitted use in the city. They had been written out of the manufacturing zone, and there were really no standards for how you upgrade those units. Dan Nixon and Lock It Up Storage had purchased some surrounding older storage units, as kind of taken his project and kind of consumed all of them as one project, and approached the city about how do we upgrade these and bring them into the modern age. So a code was written. It's 11-10 Commercial and Manufacturing Zone Article E, Class A self-storage upgrade standards. So we had actually worked with the applicant in developing those standards at that time. It's about 2 years ago. And since then, they've been working on their project for what they want to do as far as upgrades go, improvements, and some other infrastructure improvements immediately surrounding the project. I do want to say that this is phase one of 2 phases that the Planning Commission will see. The phase 1 isolates the storage unit area that exists today. Phase 2 would be 1900 North and the corner of 1900 North and Washington Boulevard, where a commercial sales leasing building would go. So that, while it's shown on the plans, isn't in consideration or under discussions tonight. Some of that relates to improvements along 1900 and Coldwater Creek and other, immediate parking needs in the area surrounding businesses. It made sense for the applicant to separate the project. So tonight we'll be looking at just that area, I'd say behind the fence, where they're going to upgrade. Generally, the upgrades consist of an additional building along the fence line currently on 2000 North, where we'll also be able to pick up a sidewalk, enclosing some currently open RV storage, and then construction of a 2-story, right in the center, a 2-story climate controlled modern storage facility building. So as we look through this, the nice thing is that the manufacturing M1 zone really has very few, it doesn't have a whole lot of standards. I mean, there's very open, you can do a lot. So we focus right in on this Article E Class A self-storage upgrades. As I've gone through it, I made a comment on each of the standards that are met, and I'm going to just actually hit in the staff report those things that are a condition of approval. So frontage is met. It's a pre-existing site that's being upgraded. That is met. On lighting, the site will need to meet dark sky requirements with 50% cutoff fixtures that point downward only. This is a condition of approval. We didn't have a full photometric plan that came in, and what we'll do is we'll review lights as they are associated with each individual building permit on the site, and as well as an overall, if they're changing an overall lighting on the site. The low impact development techniques. So this is one that along Coldwater Creek right now, all of the entire site is almost entirely hard surface roofs or other sort of impervious like compacted gravels that's essentially just surface draining into Coldwater Creek as it is. So we don't, as far as staff knows, have any water quality issues going into Coldwater Creek, and this project will only better those. So we're going to require them to have 2 detention ponds. Those detention ponds will have oil water separators. They've designed those. The original site or the original design had a small amount of retention. Retentions are ponds that intend to hold water forever versus detention, which is just metered the water out until it's gone. We're recommending that the basin be redesigned so that it has no standing water. It's detention only. And we just want to confirm with the applicant that there is no other stream alteration permit or Army Corps of Engineers permit required as part of this. So it's a condition of approval. It can either be a letter of concurrence from the Army Corps, or if they do have a stream alteration permit, just the approval of that through the Army Corps. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure for the applicant, but it's a verification the engineer would like to do, mostly because any downstream effects would be the city's, responsibility, or we would be the ones to hear from it. And we just want to make sure we don't impact that. Signage is all approved administratively. There's not a whole lot of architectural design to storage buildings. That's not a negative comment. It's just the truth on this. So they have worked really hard to make sure that there is a staggered orientation of the wall along 2000 North. In the code, that's the way that I'm interpreting it, is that those long stretches of building that are along property lines that are behind fences don't have that same staggering requirement. So we're requiring it on 2000 North. 2000 North has a pretty narrow road right of way as it is now. So that sidewalk will run at the back of curb, and those building relief cutouts will actually provide some areas for landscaping that would be on the inside of the sidewalk. So snow storage, snow removal is going to be an issue on 2000. It always sort of has been, and we deal with that on those narrow right of ways. But it's really a compromise that we have to make, and we are going to pick up a sidewalk, which will be much better for the area.
And what about so we're picking up a sidewalk on 2000.
Mhm.
And what about a wall or a fence? So
The back of the building will be able to operate as the wall or the fence on that side. So you'll have no additional wall or fence. There will be no units that are accessible off of 2000. So as you walk along 2000, you'll have the wall and no longer.
It's how high then?
How high is your building on the backside of 2000? 12 feet? On 2000? No, the units on 2000, the single height units on 2000. Yeah, they're between like 12 and 15
I know we're not
feet.
in discussion, but my concern there is that we essentially built a 15-foot wall where if it were a fence, it would be limited to 8 feet, 6 feet. And
Yeah,
if that, it went to, on the, because I understand it's the backside of this building, but it's the front side of 2000, right? And we've got a 15-foot wall right on the street. And
So it does say our code says buildings which meet the design standards and which are constructed on the property line may operate as a perimeter fence. So in this case, the code was written so that buildings that meet the design standards can be that wall. And in the manufacturing zone, you can go 35 feet tall. So technically they could build a 35-foot wall on property line.
And how long is that building? So does it run the whole length of the?
It runs that first length. It's probably 200 feet, but every 40 feet it'll be staggered. So there's a jog in the building.
Gotcha.
Right
I see.
there on the north side where it says demolition. Well,
It's just a big wall.
yep, there you go, John. So 14 feet tall and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 times 4. You're right. It'll be a big wall along 2000.
Big long wall.
A big
Yeah, I
long
mean,
wall.
it's,
And that's the point of the
Right.
wall articulation. So John, if you can drag your mouse along and just show that it's not a single blank wall like you'd have on the back of a shopping center or something like that. Every 40 feet, it has a 4-foot jut out and that'll come down 40 feet and then come back up and back down. And each one of those will be kind of with landscaping dropped in. So you'll have trees, bushes, zero, like water-wise landscaping, and the sidewalk otherwise will be kind of attached, basically.
the sidewalk
between
runs straight.
that building. Mhm.
It doesn't jot in and out. with
No,
that.
no, the sidewalk it goes around a few power poles and other things that'll be major impacts to move, but I think that only happens once or twice. But for the most part, it just runs straight.
Okay. Do we want any discussion about this or do you want to let him get through his presentation first? Okay,
I've got just a couple
Okay,
more and then
that's fine. Totally fine.
the remainder of the site will be fenced. Again, some of the fencing that happens over on Coldwater Creek side has been undercut over time. So if there are going to be improvements to that fence, it's sort of sitting with the bottoms floating. We just want to make sure that stream alteration permit, they're all good to go there. Any standards for outdoor storage is met. They're really eliminating, for the most part, outdoor storage and closing that in. Landscaping is met, 10% of the site, and the hours of operations are met as the applicant actually helped us with writing the code. General plan map shows this area as Southtown mixed use with 2 land use designations that are mixed use and commercial. This is the only area of our city with, well, there's this and one other in the Southtown mixed use area that have manufacturing M1. So staff believes that, one, it's a legal non-conforming use within the mixed use zone. It's an upgrade, which we intended to make sure we keep these types of sites modern and clean and continue to be viable and not depreciate in our city. We feel like this can be supported, that it meets the general plan map designation and that planning commission can find the proposal consistent with the general plan. So the conditions of approval are to meet the requirements and conditions of the technical review memo, engineering department letter, fire department email regarding location of a fire hydrant within proximity of the structures, and building department reviews prior to issuance of a building permit. All lighting needs to be dark sky with 50% cutoff fixtures. Amend the stormwater basin to remove retention of water. Provide the city with a copy of any and all stream alteration permits necessary from the Army Corps of Engineers. And then a landscape review is completed at the time of the building permit to assure the design and installation meets the design standards. Typically, what happens with that is we get a detailed landscape plan, either at site plan or with the building permit, and prior to certificate of occupancy on all commercial manufacturing and multifamily, staff goes out and does an on-site check and determines on site that the landscaping has been met. For the planning commission tonight, you consider whether the site plan meets the requirements of the applicable city zoning ordinance and is it consistent with the general plan. The action tonight is an administrative item with really little room for interpreting the code. What we're doing is applying the code that we have, and we don't really have any we have 0 legislative power in this one. For the recommendation, staff recommends site plan approval of lock-it-up storage upgrades for phase 1 based on the conditions listed in the staff report and the supporting departmental recommendations. And with that, I'll take any questions.
We have questions for Scott?
It's pretty straightforward.
Mr. Mason, you didn't have a question?
I didn't really have questions. I had just commentary, but I really don't have any questions, really. I'd like to hear from the applicant, then we can discuss it, I guess.
Would the applicant like to address us? You don't have to.
This mic works or that one, whichever you prefer.
You can sit down or stand up. How about that?
Thank you. This is really nice.
That's a nice
It's a lot nicer than I've seen in other cities. Great.
What's that?
Second meeting.
Oh, in this building?
to sit, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
this is our
wow.
third, I
There we
think our
go.
third meeting in here.
Yeah. About our third meeting, so-
If
I
you
feel
could-
like I should be sending people to jail or something.
Oh, that's why you told us to come up.
Yeah. So tell me, why were you speeding on 2600 today, sir?
To get to
Did
a
you not
planning
see those
commission
children?
meeting. If you could go to the stormwater plan, which is, let's see. That is C 5.2. Okay, there we go. Yeah, if you can zoom in just a little bit. I just wanted to point out that this is gonna be a nice upgrade for water quality. With Coldwater Creek. There's a curb that runs, a new curb that runs along the south part right there, yes. And then that drains into one stormwater basin, and then we have the second stormwater basin also to the left. And so that entire creek is part of this project. The water will go to the curb and then into the stormwater basin. Instead of now it's kind of sheet draining and then hits the landscape and then the creek. So that's going to be improvement. In terms of the stream alteration permit, our plan is to meet with the Army Corps, walk the site, discuss it. And I mean, if we don't have to impact it, we don't want to. Our goal is not to impact it. But if we have to fix some fence posts because of erosion or things like that, and if that requires a permit, we will. If not, then we'll just get the letter from them on that. And then I want to mention, I think on 2000 on the north, it's going to be a nice improvement. I just drove it again. Been there many times, but adding the sidewalk, changing from barbed wire fence, chain link to a nice building with articulation, different materials, the bump outs and the landscaping, and then the sidewalk. I think that'll be a nice improvement. to
On
that.
on the first page, it showed like property lines. Is your property line technically go out in the road like some of the other ones do on the street? Do you know? Does your property go out into the middle of the road like some of them do on this street?
No,
So
It's
your fence is property line. I just had, the first page, it looked like you were,
I
the
think that-
property
I
was
think
out in
in
there.
this
Maybe
situation,
scroll up, but
when they redid 2000 North several years ago, and this was before I bought it, but I think when they did that, it was, they put the property line right behind curb on that side of the street. And then the other side of the street was where it was being expanded.
oh, okay.
I could be wrong on that. I have to look at the survey.
Well, if scroll up to the first page, John, that we were looking at, it looked like, which I know where the road is at, but I mean, just one of those pages that showed, it almost looked like it showed property out in the road and then keep going, I think that, or is that it?
Right, should be on that first page.
Right, oh,
Demolition plan.
that one, that dashed line that's on the angle up there. I was wondering if that was property line and then
I don't think that.
right away went to where it was, but
No, that's not property line.
so not that it matters, but if it was,
Mhm.
I would suggest that now is an opportunity to make sure that's just, that little section is just deeded back to the city. Because I think in that street, we have a couple of private properties that are out in the street still.
We do, and we have a couple of,
Right away instead of
we
actually.
have a couple stretches of county too that
Yeah.
jog out. So
Messed
in the survey, I don't know if you've had this property surveyed or if you're going to prior to having, yeah, so we could, as a condition of approval, you could ask
up.
for
Is that,
dedication.
are you fine to that? If there is any property ownership you have that's in the current right of way, to just deed that over to the city instead of leave it as right of way? Not adding any property. Do you know, you know what I'm saying? Like, see that, this map where that hashed line is out in the road?
Yeah. I don't
If
think
that's
a boundary
technically-
line. I don't think that's a boundary line.
Okay.
I think the boundary line is the darker line as you zoom in.
Cause I can't remember if we had this issue with Marsh next door when they expanded, or if it was the photo place across the
Well, I know
street.
he
Seems like the
wasn't
dance
required
company
to
had
put a
it,
sidewalk
didn't it?
in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
somewhere where it was like,
There's a note in a circle.
I think it's just a call out line to
Okay.
send you to another sheet.
oh, is that what it
Okay.
is? Oh,
That's
there
not a
you go.
boundary line.
Okay, that's what, so it's just like
When they did
putting
that,
that
It
insert
should,
on a
it
different
should
page.
be,
Okay.
it should be rounded on the edges to,
Boundary
clarify
line
it,
is
but-
the darker hash line
And city engineering did look at it twice.
right there.
okay.
That's the boundary line right there.
I only bring that up because I think when they expanded, when your neighbor expanded there, that was part of the issue is.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'd like to make a comment on the long wall. I appreciate the fact that that's a long wall. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that I didn't build this place. I bought it from people. And
oh, I wasn't aware that building already exists and that wall already exists. I thought we were constructing that.
yeah,
no,
so
this
No,
wall
the
we're
new
talking
one
about will
they're
be a
gonna
new one.
build.
yeah, the old buildings, we're building the new ones, but
Okay,
if you want to see what I built, you can look in Farmington and Mill Creek and Cottonwood Heights and Draper. We built some beautiful buildings. So we're doing the best we can with the articulation and the jogs in the building. Against our will, we agreed to put in the sidewalk. And we're
Thank you.
happy that we're doing that. I think it'll be okay. And I think you'll really like the landscaping. And I think we're looking for taller skinny trees to take away the 15 feet in the height. So
Soften it up.
I know it's going to look a lot better than it looks now.
And there's no fence there, right? That's, the building really is the
Yeah,
barrier.
that's the
Okay.
fence.
and there currently is a chain link fence, right? If I recall, right?
Yeah.
Little-
Like
Well,
razor
barbed
wires.
razor wire in the
And then you see everybody's boats,
Yeah,
RVs, and all that's going away. Everything will be internal.
so
Yeah.
it
So it'll
would
be
be
nice.
better.
And then the west
If
boundary
you haven't gone
line,
there, sorry.
the west boundary has a solid stamped concrete fence. So we'll be hiding a lot of stuff that's unsightly.
I mean, the thing I'll add is I've been and seen a lot of lock it up storages properties before, and in terms of aesthetics and even their advanced security measures, I do think they're some of the best self-storage units that you can, have or want in your city in terms of keeping, I don't know, with the high security, keeping police crime costs down. And then they always have invested in their buildings and kept them well maintained. Like there's some out on Wall, and then I've seen the newer properties down south, and they're all actually quite impressive compared to other self-storage properties I've seen.
Thank you, Chad. One thing we have done here, that we've just converted all of our exterior door locks to digital locks now. So a thief can't crawl under that fence under the creek like they have done in the years past and cut locks because there's no lock to cut. So customers use an app to open the lock, and it's really, they're loving it. So from a security standpoint, all these improvements that we're making are going on to the existing stuff as well. And I think when we're all done with this, it's going to look really nice and be a good addition to the community.
Thank you.
thank you.
And phase two, I want to mention is we'll work with the plans that you have for Washington in terms of nicer architecture facing the street. There'll be a little trailhead there, and then the trail along 1900. And that's something we'll be talking more at the city about. That takes some figuring out and working on. So And also with the building on Washington, that's also while we're putting that on phase 2.
Thank you.
So I was critical, I was critical of the building wall, and I believe Mr. Hess demonstrated that it meets code, and the whether or not it meets the spirit of the law isn't really up for debate. If it meets the letter of the law, I believe it's our obligation to approve it, because it is what it is. I do think maybe that's something to look at, because it is a big wall right up next to the road, right? And we've said in other areas we don't want that. And I understand this is a different zone. I don't think that's up for debate tonight with this application, because I think if it meets the letter of the law, it's an administrative item, and we approve it. I do wonder if we've got a hole that would allow someone to build a big
Well,
15-foot wall.
one thing to consider, this and the block are the only manufactured zones in the whole city.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
they're built out. So
And the new 1700 North Terry Severing's mixed use project was
Yeah.
approved as M1.
it was.
It
But
was.
yeah, so imagine,
We need
so
a new city council. Those idiots.
So pivot that now, and that wall, do you want that wall along Washington Boulevard? You know what I mean?
I'm on record. I know.
We want that 34 feet. And this is not about our applicant, right? This is about our code. But do we want 500 feet? That's a long, narrow building that's 30 feet tall to be a wall right up against a public
Yeah,
right
and
away, right? So
I totally agree, and I'm sensitive to that, but the trade-off here is that if you drive 2000 right now, you may have the open views, but what you have open views of is
Yeah.
not as nice looking.
yeah,
as-
I
as
actually
the-
completely agree
the
about this
upright
application.
landscape and stuff.
And
So-
I think we're getting more out of this than we're giving up. Don't get me wrong. I've been critical. I'm just a jerk, really, is what it comes down to. I just like to, it's the one way I have power in my life.
It's the only time we let him talk.
But I do think there's an opportunity to maybe address something so we don't get caught,
In a
this isn't
crisis situation.
right. This isn't a bad scenario, but we could get caught down the road in a bad scenario with a loophole like this. And so that's my only
Valid point.
commentary.
Yeah.
I think it violates the spirit of the law, which is, having a big barrier right up next to the sidewalk. So, but I do think this should be approved.
Although in this case, it sounds like it's better than, this prison fence that's
Certainly,
there now.
yeah, 2000. And I was also concerned about, the ability to future expand 2000, because it is a long, narrow street that's more and more heavily used as that west end of it gets built out. And I was concerned that putting a structure that close would inhibit our ability to build it out, but I don't think that's up for debate tonight.
No, for the most part, like the applicant had said on 2000, there was an agreement with property owners to the west that south line is essentially fixed, because the area to the north, which is west of the cannery, and then one property that's no longer in the unincorporated, and then another piece in the unincorporated county, before you get to 225 East is really where the area of expansion exists there, where the city will need to work with the property owners are the next two property owners over. One is the dance studio, and then the corner where Kavanaugh's is, that the city really will need to figure out a way to pick up, purchase whatever, some right of way and assist in reconfiguring that parking that currently is nose right at the back of the curb. If we want 2000 sidewalk to extend all the way to Washington, which as we build out is really a need in that area. But that's its own capital improvement project we've got to figure out.
As Scott has mentioned, it does have that articulation, so it bumps back. You get those landscape pockets that I think there was some thought into that. It may not.
I can see that.
But
Yeah.
it does pop back, so there's landscaping to soften it, green it up a little bit, and also give a little bit of fill. It's kind of like in an urban situation where you want the buildings up on the street, so you can have windows and glass. Yes, it's not as pretty. You're not looking in at ZCMI and the Christmas
So
stuff. Or any
I
of
appreciate that. We may have a future applicant who's not as thoughtful. And so I think we have some cleanup to do, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
So there
I
is some
agree.
consideration that. And take a look at it now, go drive it the next month, and then come back and look at it when we're done with the project.
And then Commissioner Thomas, it sounds like there's no appetite or reason to add any addendum to this that they look into the right away into the street, right? That doesn't sound like we,
Sounds like it's
No.
going.
all right. Given that, I'd move that we approve this item with the conditions as listed in the staff report.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, that's our only agenda item. If the any public would like to comment, we invite you to do so at this time. I don't know who we have online with us.
You
No
can-
pub,
You should be able to see who's online on the screen in front of
oh,
you,
right there.
but no one has raised hands, so.
Well, just going back to my comment, since I see one of our city councilmen on there. I don't like that we have a manufacturing zone on 1700 that now, regardless of whether we want it or not, a building just like that with a big tall wall could be down 1700 because it's zoned manufacturing, but I don't get to make that vote, just a recommendation. So I hope it goes well. I hope something else goes there.
You'll see it soon.
And it'll be storage
Dun,
units,
dun,
I'm
dun.
sure, because
The
it's
site
already
plan will
been
be
here
coming
twice.
soon.
Any remarks from planning commissioners besides mine?
I guess I just have like a question, which is, to Commissioner Mason's points. I mean, obviously, we're not the body to like change something like you're mentioning with this wall and this concept.
I think we are the body to
Or
recommend it.
Can
We
we?
get that
I
ball
guess
moving.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
Are
we can't make law.
how do we do that?
So we don't make law, but we make recommendations
Okay.
and those get passed on. And if that's something, an appetite we had, I think Commissioner Thomas knows
Take
this
a
way.
look at the ordinance.
We could ask staff that we want to take a
Oh,
look at the
okay.
ordinance. We could make recommendations and
Okay,
that's how that works.
that's what I was curious about, because I agree with you. I think that's really troubling, especially
Yeah, I
when we
mean-
have a new zone that was it was rezoned to be.
And again, that was my initial knee-jerk reaction to seeing that big wall. There may be purpose for it, right? You'd really have to dissect it and come up, and figure out, in a manufacturing zone, does that make
But
sense?
it
And
could be just a cinder block wall straight up in the air.
like 30 feet high,
Can be.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I really, you guys, I think you guys did a great job with that. I think the cantilevers or whatever you call it will look cool. So I think you guys could have been a lot more sinister. You should have been really.
Hey, I appreciate that as well. You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to beautify that wall, especially where you were sort of held to the fire on the sidewalk. So I appreciated that. And one of the reasons that was pretty easy to vote through. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
Any
good.
Any other remarks, planning commissioners?
So is it possible to get that on the agenda at some point in the near future?
So just, just for full disclosure, we already have a site plan application in from the other project. So the way land use law works is you get the letter of the law the day you apply. So a change midstream would only affect new projects. And you never know, maybe there's a future manufacturing rezone. So it might be worth looking into. Staff is more than willing to begin looking at that on recommendation of the planning commission. I think that would require, I don't know how that works, John, with the council, they can just direct staff or the mayor can direct staff. Planning commission, you may want to vote on that or tell me, some clear direction. But you will be seeing the site plan application. It's in, we've been going back and forth. They've had a technical review committee meeting already, several comments. And that would be the end at this point of any new storage units or really upgraded storage units in the city that we're aware of until another application comes in. So we can be proactive if we think the council's going to approve more manufacturing. Otherwise, it would make us feel better that we changed it, but it wouldn't affect any projects.
It would affect future development or redevelopment though.
It would, and I guess, staff understood at the time that the code was being written, that this was both a possibility and a likelihood in talking to the applicant. The trade-off is sort of, you could have had an 8-foot cinder block wall with no articulation, just right at back a property line, right at back a sidewalk, an 8-foot wall, and then 10 feet away from that, a building that's 15 feet tall. So the effect would have been narrowing their drive aisle, but I think visually you got a better thing by having a 15-foot tall building with articulation at the property line. But 14 foot tall building.
I think
but
there's
it's
no
a
doubt
major-
that it's a great solution
major
for this
trade-off, yeah.
particular location, that we couldn't have probably asked for anything more. I think what Commissioner Mason is saying is it leaves a lot of wiggle room for something not so beautiful
Oh, yeah.
in the future that we would really have no option but to approve it.
And with a manufacturing zone, say these storage units were fully depreciated and a different developer had purchased them, they could have knocked them down and put a 35-foot tall building, essentially a flat wall blank building with minimal articulation at the back of sidewalk in the manufacturing zone today. So that's just, if you
Well,
want to
the
look at
wall-
the manufacturing
wall
zone
isn't
as a whole.
subject to just storage units. It's any building
Right.
Yeah,
in the manufacturing.
Right.
right.
So,
Exactly.
Yep.
but
But we can look at that. We, right, I don't know.
Yeah, and if I can just comment on that a little bit. One thing that was frustrating to me as a business owner, existing business owner wanting to upgrade this business was, I felt like I really got my feet put to the fire to meet maximum requirements as if it were a new project. And I fought them for a while and argued and made my point and gave up and just did it. And we're spending probably close to $1 million on stormwater management to meet city's requirements on new builds. And I would just suggest in the future, and of course, now this benefits my competitor developers because I'm going ahead and just sucking it up and conforming. But if you want old properties, and we're talking about I'm talking about King's Plaza as one, but you want these old rundown properties to be upgraded and improved, lighten up on the restrictions and try and find more common ground. And you might find more of these landowners and property owners that own these older properties. They might be more willing to upgrade them and make them nicer if you're not so strict on the ordinance as if it were a new building. I mean, I met with my investors on this property and we're spending so much money on improvements to this property that generate no additional income. And so it just makes no financial sense, other than the fact that I just want to be a responsible developer and make my developments look nice. And I want them to be respected and liked in the city. I want my customers to enjoy being there. So that's why we're doing it. But just wanted to make that comment. Might be in the future. I'm not talking about huge things, but thought it was a little over the top from engineering and some of the requirements. And I think we even got more coming down the road with that creek when we go into phase 2 that are like, surprising that they really want me to do these things and pay for them all, when all I wanted to do was a nice little remodel. And now I'm like having all kinds of stuff thrown at me. So it's not a complaint. It's just a suggestion for future take note. I'm happy to do it. At the end of the day, we're going to put cleaner water in Coldwater Creek, and I guess I'm happy for that.
I mean, I have a question. I don't know if we have an answer. What did trigger is it because it's a new building on an existing property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And it was a non-conforming use.
Okay.
Existing non-conforming use. So I had to get a conditional use permit, correct?
It's not a conditional use permit. It's because we did change the code to permit these Class A storage, but you had to go through a zone. You had to write a zone basically, or a zoning code section that would allow this to go in. But right now it's nearly 100% impervious. They are pulling some asphalt up. They're making some changes. There's way undersized detention on this one. So it's, new improvements are a way to pick up these betterments essentially. So I think that's a fair comment. And maybe there's a meet in the.
Mistake was made in 2003 when it was developed, and
Right.
what the city required them to do was absolutely nothing. So.
Oh, we're fixing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally, we're, take our pennies. I'm joking, but yeah.
Again, thanks. Your point was well made.
We've got good equity, it's a good property, and it's matured. I mean, the market has surrounded this property, and so it has to be storage because there's a huge demand for self-storage, and there's not much of it in the city. So it needs to be there, but it'll turn out really nice. We're really excited about it. Gonna own it for a long time. I'm gonna be in a grave by the time it's sold. So.
I'm just gonna have one more question for the applicant since we're on the topic. With other self-storage properties, these are kind of always, cities always have, they're wary, right? You talked about the city required nothing in 2003 and then they required a lot in 2024. So you're kind of calling for some middle ground here on what would be your recommendation for other self-storage unit properties? Because if they wanted to just upgrade, they wouldn't have to go to the extreme that Lock It Up Storage has had. If they wanted just to,
If they were face changing the buildings, then it's just, I think it was the degree to which they're improving. So they're tearing out asphalt, they're building a new 2-story building, they're enclosing a bunch of open storage. I think you're taking some of the buildings down and all the stuff on the west, building a new building. So it was, maybe it's undefined specifically in the code, but it's like a trigger of you're gonna paint the outside of your building and add a window and you're gonna change the exterior as an upgrade or like a tenant remodel versus this is in some ways like 30% a brand new site. And
sure.
and they're
Was it 30% more impervious surface?
it's actually because we required them to detain, there's less impervious surface ultimately. So
Because typically, in other jurisdictions, it's change of occupancy or change of use that triggers these, not necessarily mow down a building and build one in the same footprint. This one's not exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I guess to cut to the question, Dan is an owner of a lot of self-storage properties. I don't think we can do anything about a new building, right? A new building is more or less triggering a change of use or change of occupancy, even if it's the same occupancy, right? It's a new build. But you were talking about improvements. Are you kind of recommending if there's existing buildings and they needed to be maybe demolished but built within the same footprint to go easier on them to lighten that restriction? Or I guess I'm trying to.
I think the biggest issue was our storm drainage. That's where our biggest cost is. It's really turned into and it ate up a lot of property to create the detention basins. But there wasn't much of a detention basin to begin with, and it was 8 acres of property. So I get where engineering is coming from. So
yeah, I'm just trying to clarify your opinion on the existing properties, because I know that if people are going to improve their properties, they're going to want to add more units, which would then trigger what you had to go through. But I'm almost wondering if there couldn't be a discussion on some of the existing self-storage, if they wanted to improve them, maybe even add a second level and do that internal type self-storage. If the footprint didn't change, if we could adjust our code or our ordinances to say, hey, if you're within the same footprint, we will allow a new, more modern building. Because I do think the things you're doing with the modern security practices is a net win for the cities you're doing it in, just because of police. I guess we can't reduce much of the fire, we don't, people put weird stuff in storage.
We're sprinkling the big buildings.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so.
But I think some of those upgrades, I think just looking at trade-offs, I'm just, again, trying to clarify, but.
Yeah, and if I can add a comment to anything that's new, I don't know how this property got rezoned. It went right under my radar, but, and I know a lot of people aren't.
I don't know either.
But I can tell you, if you look at Farmington, we helped them write a Class A self-storage ordinance. Maybe you can't do anything about this. I know I'm too far down the road, but there's some things in some Class A self-storage ordinances were written in Farmington and in our Draper project. We had to write some things into an ordinance and in Cottonwood Heights. If you research those, there's some really nice architectural restrictions that are there that should be required by anybody doing anything new, in my opinion.
Yeah, and some of those are glass, architecture, articulation, terms of bumping out and all of that. The landscaping, the colors, the building shape, like those buildings don't look like 1982 storage cinder block.
Yeah.
They look like they could be flex buildings or office or something a little techy.
we're struggling at our Farmington location because people think it's an office building.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like an office building.
It's next
But
to a
it's-
Mercedes.
But,
Oh,
you know, that's what they wanted and it's, we were glad to do it, but, don't, man, make sure it looks, it's right there on Washington Boulevard. Make sure it looks really, really, really good. Don't let them build.
Yeah, I'd invite you to come for the site plan discussion for the look out for it. Maybe I'll get a hold of you and have you come. You can give some public comments
I'd be
based on
happy
your
to help with any
expertise. So,
ordinance, But we're not, that's, I don't know if we're there. Anyway, happy to help.
yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else, Scott?
So from us, Ryan and I will be going down to Cedar City next week for the Utah APA conference. That's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Conferences Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, and Friday morning. We do still have a little bit of travel and training budget for the end of the year. If you find that you have time, we can likely accommodate you if we can find a hotel room down there right now. There's probably still rooms or Airbnb. So just give me a call and let me know. But Ryan and I will be down there and we'll report back.
What was the date on that again?
It's the 8th, 9th, and 10th next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So just shoot me an email if you're interested. We do have a little bit of that travel and training. And then Ryan and I also have just recently gotten back from the National American Planning Association Conference in Minneapolis. That had about 4,000 registered participants, and throughout the week, like we were there 4 days throughout that, it kind of ebbed and flowed with how busy it was. There was pretty good contingency from Utah. Had a few dinners and different meetings with those guys who were out there and had a really great time. And I've compiled some notes. Ryan has some notes, so we'll make a little report back email to the Planning Commission and City Council. Generally, though, I would say that in the past, I've gone to national conferences and they haven't felt very relatable to either Utah as a region or the size of the jurisdiction I've worked in. This national conference was completely different. Like, it doesn't matter if you are New York, LA, Tampa, Atlanta, or North Ogden, you are dealing with housing issues right now. And everyone's grappling with almost the same housing issues. And it's things like how expensive everything is, difficulty in getting subs, length of subdivision processes and approvals, holding stuff up, building departments that are concerned about finance. I heard about
City planning commissions.
city planning. Yeah. They held the conference over a weekend, and I can only think about that was because it wouldn't impact city planning commissions across the nation. But it was very, very relevant. I felt like this one was more so than any conference I've had. Also, back in 2019, you had the Paradise, California fires. So there was a whole section on urban wildland interface that was really interesting and I think relatable to North Ogden with what we currently have to build up on the hill and some of the recommendations and guidelines there. So I found that it was really beneficial.
Maintain some open space. or
Yeah,
just let it
maintain
grow
open
wild?
space. Basically, just don't develop up there the further you get up. But it was very interesting to hear all of these really sophisticated cities and, you know, planning directors in cities that have a million plus people grappling with literally the same issues that we are at 20,000 people. It was like refreshing to, I don't know, just being in that same pain with everybody right now. So we're all dealing with it. But I thought it was really interesting. I don't know, Ryan, if you have anything to add, but that's everything from me.
Yeah, I just well, I echo what Scott said. Like, this is my first national conference, and it was really good to meet planners in other cities, you know, across the country, really, and just like relate to what they're doing, and then I was able to do one of their mobile tours and kind of see the city a little bit and see what they do to help businesses in that city and help the business owners kind of grow. So yeah, it was a really good experience for sure.
Thank you. John?
We do have some training that we will be doing with this group as part of our meetings. You know, as you know, we need to get so many hours a year in. If you have ideas on trainings you'd like, or even speakers that you might, I mean, obviously we're not going to get, you know, a former US president or anything like that to show up here, but we'd be happy to reach out if you've got ideas.
Some of the most helpful ones for me along the
Why not?
lines of just been our own
Lots of
review of
ground.
our own format, who speaks when and what our own bylaws say and stuff, just a review of that.
I
as-
second that.
yeah.
And as a new planning commissioner, I would have really appreciated that earlier in my tenure. So I love that idea.
We've also, another Robert's rules was very helpful for me. It's kind of, those kind of go hand in hand a little bit, but
So, and then I'll be done so we can be done by 7.
a new record.
Motion to adjourn?